Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 326. I am your host, Lauren Gray, and a pleasure to have you today, actually, and for everyone that is joining us on all of the channels, including our TV channel, which, by the way, I started getting emails from people. Thank you so much. Which we broadcast live on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Prime, Google Play, also on your Android and iOS devices. And also, we are in your game consoles on Twitch. So if you follow us on that, which we did have someone reach out and say, "Hey, I watch you on my PlayStation." It's like pretty cool. Anyhow, I think we're pretty much covered, blanketed everywhere. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. Multiple places in all those locations. And then, of course, we re-simulcast during the week. So thank you for everyone that watches the show, whether we do it live now. Jason, thank you for being in the room right now, along with everybody else that watches on recorded. And I also understand a lot of people listen to us because honestly, after a while, staring at me is, okay. Um, but listening to the podcast, the show is actually a flattery as well. Thank you so very much for that. So today I wanted to step into an interesting topic. Again, going with our theme of one topic, 1 hour conversations. One that has turned near and dear to my heart in the course of the past few months as we begin to tackle this in a larger degree, as we begin to hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, whatever other superstitious ways you want to handle this, begin to emerge from the pandemic impact at its severest levels. And the topic today is how to fix hospitality HR, or in case the acronym is not familiar on all terms, human resources. Um, we have always, as an industry, struggled with human resources. First off, and this might be a little bit of a tirade on my part, I've always perceived that human resources has not been to the function for first and foremost to the team and staff, but is a function of the ownership of the company. And I have lived on that side, both as in all the previous jobs I've had as GMs or corporate or whatever, where HR was the mitigator of issues. They were the provider of standards. They were the enforcer of standards. Now, yes, of course, there was functions and protocols associated with HR about following good guidelines, legalities, and so forth, but that usually was to the protective benefit of the company. Um, Very rarely did I see a HR department vanguard issues associated with team members. I've worked in environments that had unions. I've worked in environments that didn't have unions, right to work states and so forth. I've worked in other countries where unions had an influence and what have you. And HR was always on the other side of the table when it came to those issues. Oftentimes, and you can think of this firsthand, if ever anything happened and involved a incident of any sort, HR was first there to determine exposure, uh, liability, concerns, guidelines. Did we follow? Are we vulnerable to what happened because of an inefficiency on our side? It wasn't always there first and foremost to ensure the safety and security and rights of the team members. Now, that may be a dark look to HR, and a lot of HR people might be thumping their fists going, "That's not me." And you're right, it might not be you, and that you truly try to balance that perspective to this. But at the end of the day, the check you cash is paid for by the person that owns the business. And as such, when you're faced with, do I also sacrifice my income to vanguard the purpose of a team member versus making sure that the guidelines that were enforced were the priority? I ask you to judge yourself again. So, with that in mind, we have an issue about labor. We had an issue about labor before the pandemic. We were down behind in several percentages. Um, Jason, oh, sorry. Hi, Jason. Lauren Gray. Um, so, we had an issue with the labor shortages earlier on. And that was before the pandemic. We had a shortage. We were beginning to find that people weren't as enthralled with our industry. And that was our own doing. We'll get to that in a second. That was exacerbated by the pandemic even more so. And we are now with a critical labor shortage. where we are unable to actually operate as sometimes as a businesses. We see this in the news all the time. It's a highlight feature reel that most local businesses and news feeds run with. Restaurants have to close 2 out of 7 days because they don't have staff. They have to shorten their hours because they don't have enough people on the floor. Signs posted on restaurants that say, "Hey, pardon, be patient with us. We're short people," and what have you. Being frustrated going into these same set of restaurants, seeing empty tables because you can't get seated because there's not enough staff to accommodate the service level of those tables. That's just the restaurant side. Hotels. We have mitigated the fact that housekeeping has forever changed and how it's being done, how it used to be done versus how it's currently being done. Um, we had a lot of amenities that were closed. First, because of the pandemic and the distancing and the safety precautions associated with it. But then, as a follow up, that same purpose was being used for the fact we just didn't have people. We didn't have people to man the positions that we formerly had. We lost a lot of people uh, during the pandemic because a lot of our businesses were closed, and of course travel was restricted. So there was a purpose to why we lost the business. But as we came back, this summer being the best example, a lot of businesses high rack their rates. I mean, we're paying premium, what we call back of the door rates for hotels with diminished service. It wasn't just that we weren't doing daily housekeeping, it was the fact that a lot of our amenities and outlets were actually closed if you had them on your property. So you're paying premium rate for lesser product. Also, there was a frustration level of service. A lot of businesses and companies uh, that. Oh, I'm just reading what Jason gave me. It's not our fees. It's just probably an attendees by fund for us. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. For those keep track of the chat, we are in the recording session. You can see Jason over on the side to it. Um, We'll get actually, Jason. Great that you popped into it because I do actually want to bring up the fact that there are resources. Right now, I'm talking about the gloom and doom aspects of this and the value proposition they probably you can contribute to. To be honest with you, um, from this perspective of our demand for labor, we went and did what we normally did, which was we presented and posted what we had available. And that came from the fact that we did what we've always done. This is what we're looking for. You must be able to carry 50 pounds for 30 minutes, be on your feet for 6 hours, on and on and on. We did what we always had, and that is announce that it's now able that you can come to us and solicit a job. And how did we handle those positions? Well, historically, as an industry, we did this by right of merit. All of us that have gone through hospitality, and I speak firsthand of this, I've always been in hospitality. I worked from a lowly busboy with my mom as a waitress, all the way up to all the things that I've done, including corporate and running hotels and owning restaurants and everything else. So I speak firsthand of all these positions. And that was until you have earned your stripes, don't complain. Working in food and beverage as an example, whether your own restaurant or in food and beverage within hotels, meant that that holidays were work days, um, that it was juggling schedules of when you got a half day here versus a full day there, and they were never really connected in that sense. And this was a rite of passage for us. This was, I will earn my way to the point where I can take my weekends off. It was quite a thrill when I first got my first job that I actually didn't have to work a weekend or work a holiday. An achievement in that sense. Pay was commensurate with that. We've always paid moderate, and I'm being generous when I say that. Very rarely do line staff positions, paid better than whatever they had to pay to get the people to come into the door. And those people were usually willing to work what they were available to work whenever they needed to work for the value of just having work. And follow that string for a second. Uh, Even the skilled positions, the executive positions, the positions that required higher criteria to have as a role, college educations or not, were entry level salaried relationships. Now, we've certainly jumped the gun on some positions as they become immediately needed. When revenue management changed from reservations management to revenue management, and we as an industry were seeking people that had data knowledge and education to handle numbers and so forth, we're willing to solicit salaries that would bring those talented people into our businesses so that we could utilize their skill sets. No hospitality required. That didn't work out well in many circumstances, worked out great in others. We are always willing to do that. Our CEOs do not suffer. I can certainly say that. Just like any other CEO, most corporations and companies don't suffer in comparison to what their staff gets paid for. Having worked on the agency side of service, where you've had to pay for the educated talent that you needed to provide the services. Um, that is a high contrast to what we as hospitality people did. You basically work yourself through the ranks. Once you attained a certain level of competency, you were offered the next door opening. Through food and beverage, you worked as a busboy, then you turned into a waiter, then maybe a bartender, then you turned into some AGM, then from that to a full service manager to whatever. That progression proceeded. Um, with that, this past year and a half, we've had this, and it's made the news several times, reawakening, where people paused long enough to wonder if that's what they were doing was what they wanted to do versus what they would choose to do. And from that, a lot of people that were going through this merited badge relationship in our industry, for the people that we had, decided it wasn't. I met and known many people that are very talented and reached very high levels within their organizations, realized that it wasn't worth the burn, that it would be better and easier for them to find something that they were more passionate about, more interested in. Now, that doesn't exclude everybody that has been in the world right now that says, "Oh, I'm going to change careers because I can." It doesn't explain why people aren't coming back to our industry in the full scope, but it has an influence to this. It has an impact on how people perceive what they were doing, what they were getting compensated to do that for, and their willingness to continue to do that. And what has happened is that we have this exacerbated larger demand of need in our industry. We're a very labor intensive industry. We have willfully and sometimes brazenly been proud of the fact that we have not been technologically advanced. We don't continue to improve what we do. We watch the retail industry constantly renovate their efficiencies. And to the bane of the fact that they sometimes get criticized for that they're giving up jobs to people that could use those jobs because they can automate the process. We as a hospitality industry, no, 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 it's the person, it's the human contact, which creates the dichotomy of the conversation we're having today between HR and what HR is in hospitality versus the need that the industry has right now for talented people, because HR hasn't changed. I know there's exceptions to every statement, and I'm sure there are many innovative companies that have truly fundamentally changed or have always been excellent at what they've done. I speak in generalities when I say that HR for the hospitality industry is still stuck 25, 30 years ago. And I say that from the perspective that we post our job positions. Here, if you want it, it's there, but you better qualify. Nothing about what we're offering, nothing about the value of what it is to be with us. Just if you make it through the door, we'll tell you more. And yes, there are some great companies to work for, still are and always will be in that sense. And they don't present themselves well, which is, I guess, my frustration point to this. I know of many companies that are clients of mine, and then those that I worked with from before and people that I know of that are great companies to work for, but they don't present themselves that way. They don't talk about the human value of what it is to be a part of their team. Now, make no mistake, we've burned ourselves in many ways through this pandemic crisis. There was so many companies that talked about being a family-oriented company, team is us, we take care of our people, that furloughed by the bucket loads people. We heard horror stories of muted Zoom calls where 200 people were brought on and fired summarily all together from a family-owned and operated and we care for you company. And we hear many times about people that were just like, oh, brands failed in many ways by going over and furloughing so many people that they couldn't even fulfill their obligation to those that were having their brand above their building, that there was nobody on the other end of a phone call. That's still a growing and a consistent issue with the brand relationships right now. They failed in their ability to support what they promised as a brand value to those people that committed to them, signed contracts with long durabilities. We've talked about that many times on the show. So we've had this self-inflicted wound on top of an exacerbated perfect storm. And what we're left with is now some companies are struggling to readapt their service profiles, readapt how they can provide service that they make money with in a way that it creates efficiencies. Because here's some problems that some businesses have. They don't have the monies to pay the salaries necessary to solicit the people to come in. The other alternative is they don't have the monies to create the technology that could supplant some of the demand they need for manpower. And they're left with the fact that they just have diminished services that they're somehow trying to make the monies back that they lost because of the deficiencies and the debt that they created during the time that they couldn't do business. And they're exploiting their customer service levels to a point that it's going to flash back at them time moving forward when people look back at the reviews and see how horrendous they treated guests because they weren't providing the services that they were charging exorbitant prices for. And there are too many businesses in our hospitality industry that are exactly in that nascent point right now. They're in a position that they may have made their money, short money, over the summer by exploiting the rates that they could offer based on get for the demand that was there at the expense of their customer service levels. but they did that at the expense of future value for those people, one, never to return. Two, and we know this from the propagation of social media as it exists, the influence that those people have on others to make sure that those people never do go to that place, where the word of mouth is in reverse, where it used to be the mainstream of business prior to the internet, is now the bane of the amplification of social media by able to share the fact of how horrendous their trip was. We've talked about this before. Excuse me while I drink coffee. That everybody has two trips, two travels. The one that they talk about and the real one that they had. The one that they talk about goes one of two ways. They ignore some of the minor inconveniences associated with the travel because overall the travel experience was great, and that's what they want to project forward to everyone's like how cool it was to go to Venice. Or it went horribly bad long enough that the flip of the coin happens and they talk about all the things that exacerbated why it was the trip from heck to go to Venice. And that bad smelly taxi ride that they had on the first trip that they didn't mention because really in comparison to everything else it was minor, turns into an exploitive value proposition of why everything was so bad. And on top of that, there was a stinky cab. So the stories we tell are half the equation, but that is a decision versus on the reality of that person's experience. And we are failing at that as an industry because HR has been out of the conversation, maintains itself out of the conversation, and because of that is operating in its own ecosystem that is a core influence of everything else that goes on. And please let me explain that a little bit. So most of my conversations when I get to speak and people pay me to speak, which my wife says is my perfect job, is convergence. Now, with HSMEI, I traveled to 33 different cities talking about convergence. Convergence at the time was its relationship between revenue management and marketing, the need for collaboration of data. Well, duh, that's reality now. We don't have to preach that anymore. That's if you're not already doing it, you're failing. So that has forced itself in the acceleration of our timetables for people understanding that value proposition to a current real world life. Your revenue management marketing teams have to work concurrently and in cohesive relationships to be successful. What marketing does influences what revenue's goals are. What revenue decides its goals influences what marketing's strategies are. Don't have to explain that. Been that over many, many times. The convergence conversation actually extends past that. The convergence explanation also includes into sales, their collaboration and contribution to the conversation that was just mentioned between marketing and revenue management. Operations, their fulfillment of what it is that was being presented by marketing that revenue was wanting for, that sales was telling them they could have. Accounting for their ability to accurately assess the cost associations of what was being done versus what they had to be billed for. And that was a communication of contracts and all the things we've talked about in previous shows. But here's the component that we don't talk enough about that we're talking about today, and that is the HR convergence to all of that. Because HR has the keys to the beginning of the stream. They're at the well that runs the river, and that is who on your team is working with you. Now, what HR has the power over, which is above and beyond everybody else in that conversation, is who is on your team. Now, you may think you can choose who's on your team based on whom you hire, but who gets presented to you to be hired is a part of HR. Because even if they come to you directly and say, hey, I would love to work with you, got to go to HR because there's a protocol, there's a process that has to be gone through. There's a vetting. Do they have the proper education? Do they have the proper criteria? Do they follow the guidelines? All the prerequisites to the job balanced out with the legalities. Are we evenly in our distribution of who's applying for this job? Hey, he's a friend of yours, Lauren, but we got to make sure internally we offer it to everybody else. And Susie over here or Bill over here, they've been waiting for that role for a long time and they have an opportunity to bid for it, even though they may not be qualified. But then we better be clear of why your candidate is better than them so they don't come back at us about discrimination against their ability to go over and have the role because your friend was the one you hired. Tell me those conversations don't happen. Okay. So HR is a part of it, whether you think you're a direct channel to it or not. So if you're not clear with HR on what you're looking for, okay, and that isn't being able to carry 50 pounds for 30 minutes, stand on your feet for 6 hours, or have a 3 or 5 or 4 or 6 year education or experience level or whatever have you. Okay. And by the way, why do round numbers make a difference? 5 years of experience. Why not 4.5? Why not 4? Why not 4 3/4? Why not 6, 6 1/4? Why not title, position, role, responsibility of numbers of people? We'll get to those variations a little bit. So HR has the keys to what you have as a resource. If you're not clear with them, and you may think you're clear with them as to what you're looking for, if they don't understand what you're looking for, their filter of taking applicants to the process that you're looking for is based first and foremost on legal criterias. All the conditions that mean applicability, so that should they unravel and this person is not happy with the fact that they didn't work out and are looking for recourse, they HR can get their mea culpa and say, according to all the things you said you wanted, it filled the gaps. Check the boxes. According to all the legalities of the role, ability to carry 50 pounds, 30 minutes, stand on your feet for 6 hours, whatever it is, were met. I'm out. This is now about performance, relationships, deterioration. Do we follow the protocols of notices, second notice, third notice, termination requirement? Do we follow all the rules? Again, HR is all in the middle of that. That's HR, which, by the way, is not about the team member who left. It's about the legalities and relationship of the company that's engaged. So, again, HR has to be a part of the convergence of what you need in a way that they can translate to ensure it goes beyond the check boxes of compliance to the fit of what it is that you need performance. And that's where the fix begins to happen. Because without that collaboration of communication between your department's needs and HR's ability to handle the flow of people interested in it. Now, that's under the auspices that people are even applying. We haven't got to that problem yet. We're just talking about the internal flow of communication. How well can you define what you're looking for in terms that are tangible for HR to define how they're looking for candidates for you? We know there's legalities to this. I'm not being blind to the fact that you can't ask for, I want a 6'5" dude with blonde hair and ponytail to be in this role. We know we can't do that. Some other countries you can. US you can't. Okay, we can't define it by criteria that creates bias or is discriminatory. I understand that. I'm not being ignorant to the Captain Obvious statement. What I am saying is that we can define the culture of what we have in a way that discourages the people that don't fit that culture by them discouraging their interest in it. We don't say, well, we work really hard and we don't tolerate we're not talking about a football team or something that says if you're not able to tackle, you can't join. No, we're talking about defining what it is in a role that we're wanting. So instead of being to diminish somebody's interest, the flip of the coin, really, okay, because we're going in black and whites here, is encouraging the people that sound like they're interested in what we have to offer because it sounds like what they want. So it's not about discouraging those people that may not fit our system, but encouraging the ones that would. And that allows us to pick from candidates that obviously meet the minimum criteria that we have to establish for legalities, not being blind to that, but instead also fitting the check boxes of the things that make it dynamically interesting for them to be a part of our team. If communication is a strong value proposition to your team, don't diatribe some BS description that's 5 paragraphs too long and so many extra fluffy cotton candy buzzwords that people get lost after the first 2 sentences. Be concise on what you mean by a communicative person. What do you mean by personality conflict resolution person, in the sense of how do you dialogue the confrontation of negative and positive events? Be clear about what you're offering the role for the person, the value that they present to the rest of the team, the inclusion that they feel by being a part of it, if that's what it is. If they're a solo artist that just needs to be able to operate on their own and autonomous, then that's the definition you give for that as well. But what I'm saying is, we don't do this in HR for hospitality. We don't define the roles of what we're looking for in a way that goes beyond the minimum standards of legalities and criteria that we can hold in contention for any disagreements that we have. Why? To be honest with you, probably because we've gotten burned so many times by putting people in roles with recourse that we weren't that clear, or that they weren't truly the best person. And we've gone through so many litigations uh, that you just don't want to be in those environments anymore. So you get the legalities as being the acid bath of your communication. All these things have to fit, or the person doesn't fit. That way, there is no way of recourse or problems from this. Again, HR is to the service of the ownership of the company, not to the service of the team members. And again, I know there's exceptions to all of it. And again, I know they're not everyone that operates like that. But in general, we have created that environment in hospitality. So again, how do we fix this? If you've looked at the struggles associated with people looking for positions in our industry, you'll find very quickly that we make it very hard for people, not just from the legal descriptions that we've just talked about, in the sense of, all these things that we expect you to be able to do or physically capable of doing or have the minimum requirements of education and experience and what have you. But we also are very fuzzy about what we're offering. We don't talk about rates. I've had clients where I said, "Well, so what are we paying for the position?" Well, we broach that with the person once they get past the initial criteria. Really? So let's put in a retail component. I want to buy a stereo. I'm gonna go back some years. I go up to a store and it sells stereos. Before I go in the door, somebody says, "Whoa, we have to qualify you where you can buy a stereo." Well, okay, that's fine. I'm looking for this, 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 and this. Okay, well, we have that. Great. How much is it? Well, we have to decide whether you have the money first. What? How, wait a minute. You won't tell me the price of what you're selling me for me to buy it until I tell you how much money I have to spend on it? Whoa. How bad would that feel for you, right? It's like going into the car dealership. How much is this car? Well, how much do you got? Be like, well, no, 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 that's not how this works. Same too with HR. We're doing the same thing. Well, this is the role. That's great. I fill all those positions. I can do all that. How much you paying? Well, we got to see if you qualify first. Did we? Sorry, what? Yes, I wouldn't be interested if I can't do it. Well, we got to make sure you can do all those things before we tell you how much you're going to pay. So I'm going to waste my time going through this process. Fill out a resume recently. How much fun is that? Send me, even if I hand you a CV or a resume over for what I do, I still have to fill out your form, which is the same form most everybody else is using. Even when I hand you a generic form, you're like, well, that's not our form. We need to use our form. It's the same freaking information. Can't you just take that information? No, it has to fit our format. You have to fill our form in because we're automated. We're technologically advanced. Okay. Put that information in, and then we can get back with you. And then we'll tell you about what we're willing to compensate you for, which, okay, flip the curtain over. In the backside, we're thinking, well, how experienced is this person to how much we offer them? They look minimally qualified, so we don't have to pay them that much. Or boy, these people are really qualified. Hey, haven't anybody ever heard you're overqualified? And if we want this person, we're going to have to pay more because they're probably going to be pretty valuable. Not to waste your time. Okay, I'm reading Jason's stuff on the side, which you can see on your simulcast here. Every company says the same. We let them know they must provide a salary range not to waste your time. Brent, yeah, and that's very true. And thank you, Jason, for adding that in there. Um, Adding salary ranges does give you some sense of it. Um, I would challenge one aspect about salary ranges, and that is it is unfortunately human reality that the range at the top is a carrot. Um, if I'm eminently qualified for a position, first I'm deciding whether it's worth me stepping into it because I already know I'm better than it. So my expectation is that top range is not good enough already. I'll settle with it, but then that goes back into the reality of the conversation of can we keep this guy because we might be just a stepping stone from him. We might be a fallback relationship from something he just got left from or he left from. And as soon as he finds something better, he's out. So he'll take whatever we have to offer until he goes to where he thinks he deserves to go to. So giving ranges is good for some perception of things, like there's an opportunity for this. But the reality of it is, if I'm stepping up into the role, I know you're going to offer me the low end. If I'm above the role, I know you're going to offer me, if even you're willing to take the risk that I'm going to stay around long enough, the upper endish of the role. But it's a carrot. I mean, why not be concise? And I would ask that of if anybody really is why not be concise? This is our rate. Unless there's other performance factors that you would like us to consider that would allow you the opportunity to be paid more. Make it on me. I'm applying for the job and you tell me I want to get 15 an hour. Great. Unless you got some wicked skill sets we're unaware of that makes you in this role even better for us. Whew, okay, I'll give you 17 because man, you do. You're a 6'5" dude. You can carry 300 pounds instead of a 5'5" dude can carry 200 pounds. I don't know. I mean, you can that stuff up, but the idea of being able to qualify and have that chance for me to come in because now you've defined whether it's worth it for me and then tell me what it is that I do so I can tell you why I can do it better than what you're willing to pay me initially. And let me negotiate with you. We're all about that. We go in, we make decisions like this every day as people. We walk into a store and do I buy the hamburger 3.89 a pound, or am I willing to eat crow and do it for 4.39 because I really want a hamburger tonight? Even though I know it's more expensive than probably I would want to have paid, or that there might be another store if I want to go around shopping in two or three other stores, or look on my phone or my app and find some other store, um, and see whether it's worth it my time to go and find it. No, Jason, you're fine, and I appreciate it. Yes, you're right. If companies did these things, it would be hard pressed for people that offer services to help people with HR to be better at being better at HR. I completely agree with you. The reality of it is there's too many people that don't do it right anyway. So I don't think Jason, you or me, helping anybody with HR is ever going to be out of business because nobody takes good advice very much. Very few people do, or even if they take advice in general, because nobody does things purposely wrong. Everyone does things like they think they're doing it the right thing, and a lot of HR people don't feel bad for what they're doing. They feel that they're doing what they've been asked to do, which is define the job, check marks it, so that we don't put ourselves into a negative position, that we didn't outline specifically what the candidate needed to have, so that there was no recourse to us if we qualified a candidate over another one, that we could point to the fact of why we did that and protect ourselves from the perspective of not hiring the right candidate. The unfortunate part of it was the most important relevant aspects of that candidate were nothing about the criteria that was defined by checkboxes, as was the intangibles or the tangible definition of what the role would be best for the person best suited for it. And that's the role that HR has to become more valuable with. Going back to the fixed problem, because we've definitely been talking so much about gloom and doom about all this. HR's convergence factor of this is understanding the demands of the departments in such a way that they are the front line gatekeepers of those people coming in to apply for the roles that have been presented, that they have to have the ear and the eye of what the department person described and wanted in such a way to feel and understand the human factor. Okay, the human factor of whether that person would potentially be a good candidate. It's not their decision that they are a good candidate. It's their decision if they have the potential of being a candidate. And that is a definition that has gotten lost with HR. HR has turned into a power trip sometimes. I decide who you have the worthiness to consider. I don't like them. They're whatever it is I don't like, and that's the human factor, unfortunately, in reverse. I'm not putting them in as a candidate position. They were quiet. They were demure. They fidgeted. They slumped. They dressed funny when they came in. They smelled funny when they came. Things that you can't write down, but influence the initial impact. How many times, how many articles have been written about how to dress for success, how to present yourself, how to articulate, how to answer those questions that are mundanely routine. So, what's the best thing you've ever done at a previous company? What's the worst thing? These standardizations that people mimic themselves. We're like little lemmings. Oh, what did they do? We should do it. We've had this discussion on many other levels, but there's usually three questions that happen in a C-level conversation about spending money. How much does it cost? How much you're going to make? And who else is doing it? Why is the third question asked? Because nobody, very few people, very few businesses like to be the first at trying something for fear of failure. They want to make sure that what they're doing is similar to what somebody else has already done so that they don't jeopardize their position by doing something that makes it risky for them being the first to do it. They do the same thing when it comes to interviewing is, well, we don't want to do that because what if it's wrong and we're the only ones doing it? Everyone gets to point a finger at us and say, how silly were they for doing that? So HR follows patterns. Who else does it? They do it because they did. So these silly, contrived questions of, well, if I was your previous employer, what would be the best thing that you would do? Get out of the boxes, get out of the check boxes, get into the understanding that as an HR person, you are a gatekeeper of perception. Based on what I have been shared with the department looking for this role, beyond the baseline requirements of the role, which I will challenge every day, is saying, do they really need 3 years of education? Or can two get through it? What kind of education is necessary? Um, Persona wise, well, Lauren, he's a talkative little son of a gun, and he likes collaboration, and he likes people taking initiative, and he supports people even when they're wrong. So he wants somebody that is willing to join a team that's going to be collaborative and aggressive, progressive, and take initiative and so forth. But Susie over here, she's one that likes to make sure nothing gets done unless she approves it or understands it. And so that person has to know that they are dealing with somebody that they have to go to confirm what they're doing is what they want to do, and be very clear about what it is the next action is supposed to be. Knowing this, I'm not judging either way, but knowing those things means as an HR person, when I'm sitting talking to a candidate that has first off going through the basic criteria to even be in a chair across the desk from me or in a room with me. I even hate being across the desk. We can talk about that another time. Um, I'm listening and learning to them as if I was representing the department person's personality that I know that they're going to be in for you next. It's not my judgment to think that this is the best candidate. I can certainly have that opinion, but it's my judgment to know whether they have the basic tolerances or interests or personalities, the human aspect that means that that person would probably work well with that department. That doesn't get talked about because that's intangible. And in all honesty, that gets into the realm of, oh, dang, why'd you pick that person over this one? Why didn't you pick me over them? Well, tell me what I didn't qualify for that they qualify for, or I'll sue you. That's the fear that keeps everybody from not going into this world of these things. Yep. Jason, by the way, I would recommend to everyone on the side, please read the chats that Jason's putting in because he truly is in the industry working on that. And he's putting out some excellent suggestions on these things and also what he does. So please keep track of that for as well. So with it in mind, fixing this, we're not going to fix HR people overnight or anytime really. Everyone has their own unique personalities and their own methodologies and their own requirements that their jobs have them do. And we have 8 tiers of HR. We have property level HR, we have corporate HR, we have management team HR, we have ownership HR, we have lots of different criteria. Plus, depending upon the position we're talking about, HR might not be directly involved at one particular level, and it may be a pure ownership or or executive level team engagement that goes on. We need an executive level X position, and it's purely out of looking for recruiters and getting them positioned to the CEO. It doesn't The only thing that the HR department might be in is that the submission of the candidate might be for the qualifications outlined in the job that was being solicited for. That might be their only involvement. They might have nothing to do with the interview process. Not a smart move, but all companies operate differently. So fixing HR, there are, and to Jason's point, a lot of solutions that are available to companies to begin to define how best to help themselves. We'll take the technology side first because it is probably the easiest first step for a lot of companies to do, and that is changing the modality of how they get applicants. I can look at some of the greatest companies in operation in my mind, from of greatest being their success, their culture that I know about, the people that I know them in, and look at their job application process. It is scattered, it is diffused, it is variable depending upon at what level you're looking for positions, especially multi-unit companies. Sometimes they just allow the HRs for each of the individual companies that they operate as an umbrella over to operate under their own auspices. So there's no consistency. There's no conformity, actually. Um, I've seen this time and time again with large organizations that have a diversity of ownerships, diversity of brands, diversity of locations. They're all over the board. The worst of things is when you go to a hotel website. First off, finding where you can even apply for careers, good luck. Okay. Should they actually have a careers page? Good luck that it's more than, oh, thank you so much for being interested in a careers. Fill this form out. We'll get back with you. I don't. What do you have available? Where? I live in XYZ town, and I looked at your company that owned the company of the hotel that I'm looking at. I went there, they clicked me over to your company, which says you have a careers page. I go there, and I got to fill out a form. I don't even know what you have available. I don't even. Am I barking up the wrong tree? Do you even have a job available? Why? Frustration. It's after 2 or 3 different websites and click throughs and everything else. So even if you do have, oh well, no problem. Here's our list of jobs available. Okay, cool. Let me see what we got. Well, fortunately, hopefully, they would indicate the property that they're at. But then when you go to them, you get what we just talked about or complained about, which is must carry 50 pounds for 6 minutes or 30 minutes, 6 hours on your feet, blah, 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 carry trays or stand behind a front end, whatever it is. Okay. if you have it available. Nothing about what you're offering. And then, of course, it might be, not always, might be a boilerplate of we're a family-oriented company with progressive, team-oriented. We dedicate ourselves to the improvement of our staff and team because they take care of our guests and customers. Blah blah. You know what? That's hollow. We have failed in an industry by our own actions this past year and a half. That's BS. No, the companies that say that are trying to act like that, but they don't act like it when it comes to really counting for it. I know of some companies that backed it up by actions that they went to their staff and said, look, until the last dollar in our account is exhausted, you have a job. We'll have to juggle. We'll have to probably do various things, but know that we're going to do everything we can to keep the team together until we come through this process to be able to do the business that we need to sustain everybody. Some companies did that. A lot of companies didn't. And a lot of those companies that didn't had that same boilerplate. Oh, we're focused on it. Don't listen to it. Because at the end of the day, the company takes care of the company. That's it. The idea is that you are truthful enough in that you tell the team truthfully that we take care of ourselves as best we can, but understand business is business, and we will the business is to be enabled to do anything has to survive. That may mean the fact that there are people that may lose and be furloughed. There may mean that we have to cut back hours. That may mean we have to change how we operate. We will do our best to maintain the teams because you're an investment to us. Be truthful about that. It may mean that we have to go over and cut back on things that you have come to rely on, but it also means that we're going to do everything we can to hold our commitment that before all that happens, we will be doing all the other things that we can do before we have to do that. That's truth. That doesn't really get shown up a lot of times in these boilerplates. So again, painful story in that sense. They go through and they find that the job and then they have to go through the application process. And again, it's arduous where they have to fill up their form and then submit their resume, which says the same damn stuff on it. There should be a way of saying, "Hey, I'm interested." Great. I know all your criteria is good. Fits. Check, check, check. I got all your criteria is good. At that point, it should be reinstituted back that the HR department, because we're the ones soliciting. There's lots of people out there, and we need lots of people, but there's few people that are actually applying. So we have to be the one that present. We have to dress pretty. Okay. We just don't sit back taking whoever walks in line for us. Okay. Those days are gone. Never were. Actually, have been for many years. Even worse so now. We have to dress pretty. We got to go out. We got to go over and see who's out there. And so us is to go out and reach them and say, hey, you applied for this position and you check box that you have met all the criterias that we need. We'd like to know more about you. What is it that you'd like to know more about us with? Start a relationship. Start the conversation. And yes, it's time consuming, but that's what HR gets paid to do. They're in an office solely to find out how they can fulfill the actual labor demand needs of their company and to mitigate the dialogue associated with those people with the relationship with the company that they get paychecks from. That's their job. This is their job to do this. Their understanding of the roles that are needed, their interpretation of how to solicit them, their marketing of them to find the best candidates that fit what they feel are the best mold through that process. That's their job. So this is part of their job, is to solicit the engagement of the people that have shown interest in the positions they have. Ours job, and ours, or good English, our job from a technology side, from an executive side, is to streamline the process of discovery so that HR does not get cluttered with the ambiguous and the undefined and the clutter of people that shotgun out any position role within a geographic area, whether they're qualified or not. And there's some great tools that do that. There's some great technology that does that. Um, there's also the fact that you're not alone in doing this. There are literally hundreds of sites that you can do job postings on. Some more credible than others, some more industry specific than others, some very general than others, some very expensive than others. And it's a matter of how well do you get exposed on these platforms as to how much you want to pay to be there. But you can do yourself your own best favor by being better discoverable for your own positions and roles than what pretty much 99% of the businesses I see in hospitality doing right now. And what I mean by this, let me give a real case scenario. It sounds like I'm being so very negative about HR and how executives handle them, but well, HR is given very little resources to do more than what they're already doing. They really have no marketing budget. They don't even market. A lot of times they have to go hat in hand and say, hey, for us in order to broadcast on this one platform, as big as it is, for the roles that we have, we're so first off, you have to justify that we're in such desperate need that you even have to spend money to do this because executives think that everybody's just standing at a door hoping to work with them. But they have to go over and ask for money to do something because they're not getting enough candidates coming in the door. Figure that. So then they go over and do this and they post that they have these positions. And what is it? It's static demands. This is what we have. This is what this is what we expect. This is what, in order to apply for this position, this is what we expect. That's the best they got. So you get the applicants that are willing to go through that grinder, as we've already whined about. And you get candidates that say, yes, I follow these qualifications. Okay. So then there's the how do you get back to them? So then you play the phone tag, the email gang. Okay. Well, can you come in? No. Okay. And what do we hear in the news? Oh, well, we had 5 people that were scheduled to come in. Nobody showed up. Go figure. Because you're one of what, 2, 3 dozen other positions that they're applying for. And either somebody got to them before you because they were more aggressive about the communication efforts, or they provided more information to them, which allowed them to make a decision before they even had to come to you. And you may have been their ideal job, but you didn't get in line fast enough or do well enough to get in front of them for them to want to say, thank you for the offer. I still have a couple more places I need to go to before I make a final decision. As they say, this is a buyer's market. So being better at what you have to offer, soliciting what you're offering is almost a mandate now for us to find the candidates worthy for us to consider to be a part of our teams. Because there's some awesome teams out there. There's some awesome companies out there. And they're not projecting themselves well enough. There's an interesting article that popped up from CoStar. There was a gentleman, Brian Roten, who talked about he's in Florida. He has a job. He wasn't looking necessarily for one, although that wasn't, and he decided to apply for all the jobs in the area that he was qualified for. And pretty much what he discovered, and I'll put the link in the show notes from this, was what they offered in the sense of they said for hourly doesn't exist. Their offer for full time didn't exist. Their benefits didn't exist. And a lot of times they didn't even get back to them about their application at all, even though they had fully qualified for the role. The latency, we dog on sales teams because you didn't get back to them within 24 hours. Oh my God. We did Marriott, and this is still benchmark from years ago. I mean, we're talking 10 plus years ago. They did a survey of themselves for doing sales calls to hotels to find out how long it took for the sales team to get back to a request, an inquiry for business. And this goes back many, many years. And they found out that it took 5+ days for a sales office to get back to a sales question. Somebody asking, say, "Hey, I have this event going on, and I'd like to talk to you about what you can do for me." And then that was only 61%. The rest never got a call. Nobody was less than 5 days. So sales teams got bashed for that. How bad is it that HR has the same record, if not worse? That they don't even get back to people. And why do you think? And they're going to go over and sulk that the fact that they had 5 interviews scheduled and all 5 didn't show up. You're treating the people the very way you're being treated. Good luck. Karma's a bitch. Because we have gone into this with the idea that you're lucky we have a position open. You should just jump on that and take whatever we have to offer because we have that merit system. Well, once you've proven your worth, I even did it when I hired back in the hospitality days of hotels. I would go over and hire somebody and say, look, but here's the caveat. I loved hiring people that didn't have experience. I love people that didn't work in hotels because they saw the hotel in the light a customer saw it. And that was from the consumer side. Like if they walked up to the front desk and there was nobody on the front desk, they're like, what? Me, I'd walk in and go, oh yeah, it's 2:30, 3 o'clock. It's shift change. They're in the back going back and forth. That's why nobody's at the front desk. I excused it because I was familiar with the flow of the day. Somebody that's not in the industry, they weren't tainted by the knowledge of that. And they'd be like, there's nobody at the front desk. That's wrong. You're right. It's wrong. It should always be somebody at the front desk. Same too, when it comes to the hiring process is we have this meritus that I would hire people go and say, hey, look, I'm going to hire you. You have no experience. I'm going to pay you the value of putting you in a role that you're getting educated from. It's not going to be your top dollars, but it's going to be money. It's not bad money, but it's not great money. After a year, I'm hoping that you're so freaking valuable. I have to pay whatever it's going to take to keep you. And those are the people that stayed. Those are the people that were like, you know what? When it came for the review, which by the way, annual reviews are terrible too. We can keep ragging on everything. Perpetual reviews, perpetual merit, perpetual value, perpetual money increases, and so forth is now what you just have to do. You waiting a year is silly. That's probably the most political way I can say that, because unfortunately, what happens is this: a person is stellar for X period of time, say 10, 11 months of that. And then something weird happens, bad happens, some performance issue that didn't go well just prior to the review process. Guess what's in the front of the mind of the reviewer? That. Not the 11, 10 months of happiness and joy and stellar performance, even though that is somewhere in the listings of it, perhaps, even if it was even kept track. It's the current issues, front of mind, what's in front of you. And that may have made a negative impact of how much money they got compensated in addition to keeping them there. So annual reviews are also a terrible thing. That's just me being my personal opinion. So with all of that in mind, at the end of the year, the people that were there that did stellar performance, that embraced the education they were being given, embraced the opportunity they were had, got paid okay, wasn't fantastic. Man, I gave them top dollar to stay because those were the people I didn't want them going down the road and going to my competitor and working for. I just trained these people. They're good. I don't want to lose them because I'm well, you got a whole 4% increase there, buddy. Good for you. Pat on the back. Here's a lollipop. Guess where they're going? Down the road. No, you need to give them money. And when my ownership would be like, why is your salary so high? I said, why is your revenue so high? Good for you. Because these are the people that are making the money for you. If you don't like that, go find cheap people. And then you're going to get cheap revenue. I've had those discussions and they are fun when you're on the right side of the conversation. Having bad people, you're struggling with why, with the labor that cost that you have, your performance is so low, hence your revenue is reflected from that. And that comes from HR not putting the right people in the right place for the right reasons and interviewing properly. If they're only going to the criteria that you've given them, you can't blame HR for the people that you get as candidates. By the same token, if you're too arbitrary with what you're requiring from them, you're not getting good candidates because they're not filtered enough to go over and say, wow, that person, we need them to be able to talk. And this guy's or girl is pretty silent. That's not a really good role for that position because the person needs to communicate. Now, in that description that you create for the role, it has to be emphasized the value of communication, not as a discouragement to those who don't, but as an encouragement to those who do. That role has to come into play. So, technology, going back to solution process strategy, because we're running out of time today. There are platforms that aggregate your ability. There's three functions that exist for HR: is the accumulation of the information necessary for the roles, the aggregation of its distribution, and the marketing and influence that it creates to the filtering of the candidates best suited. So, when now in the real world of HR, it's not about sitting in an office in the back of the hotel waiting for people to walk through the loading dock, so to speak, to go to the HR office to fill out a resume on a small little desk that's left in the corner for that purpose. And then they check back when you tell them to, or they'll be called back if they're qualified. There's a whole on world thing that's going on now. And there are hundreds of platforms that people make applications for or look for what is being posted for availabilities and just submit. Okay. That has to come into a big pile somewhere. And HR's first and only complaint at this particular moment is that there's a whole mess of clutter. People that are applying for roles that they are not qualified for, that they have to sort through to find the ones that are. Well, that's actually not a complaint that HR should have because they should filter what they have. And there's technology that does that. If certain criteria aren't hit based on critical criteria that you establish, those applicants don't make it to you because they don't qualify to be made to you. So that's a technology solution right there. And there are platforms that do that. Lots of platforms that do that. Services, maybe Jason, does that. Those applicants that do fit the criteria are then put into a funnel of who defines their qualifications beyond that. And that means a multi-interview process. Some companies are stagnation through analysis where they go through so many interviews, it gets lost because now it's a consensus. You're making a camel out of a horse by committee because there's so many opinions about this. You're looking for consensus and there is none. The biggest consensus that has to happen are two: the department person that's responsible for the person and the people in the department that work with them. Those are the two most critical components of that, because that department holds itself accountable to all the other departments and their collaboration, cooperation, and support. That falls on the person who's running the department, and that falls on the team that's in that department. Outside of that, the rest go down in a quick tier very quickly. HR doesn't have a personal opinion about that. They are the source revenue of it. They're at the well of the river again. Remember, their job is to facilitate based on their understanding of the role. Their definition is given by the person that needs the role filled. Theirs is to aggregate and bring together and quantify and qualify the people according to those guidelines. At that point, their personal decision is done because one, they're not in banquets. Two, they're not in housekeeping. Three, they're not at the front desk. Four, they're not in the office. Whatever the department is that they're applying for, that they're bringing those people to, they're not fully qualified to define the value factor of that person beyond what they were told that person's position's role should be. Knowing that role in that convergence conversation with them is critical. Also, with that, the department head and team is critical for their influence. Does this person look like a potential fit to the way the team dynamics work? Are they able to work with the person that is ultimately responsible for their performance? These are criteria based on interviews. So there are technologies that provide the interview process to be handled that way. The candidates that make it to this stage then can go through the process of who do you talk to next and for when and for what. And we also know in the real world, it's not always showing up at the property itself if it's even available. Sometimes you're interviewing remotely because you're bringing somebody in and willing to pay them to come in from a great distance, depending upon their skills and requirements that you have for the role. Okay, so you have to have a medium in which you can do this. We talk about Zoom and so forth. Well, there's platforms that handle this process, interview process. You can do recorded interviews. Answer the following 5 questions. Record yourself doing this. Here's a link. Click this. Answer these questions. What is this? What is that? And make them meaningful questions that are valuable to you, not generic questions that are used by everybody. Questions that are important to you that you think are helpful in your interpretation of whether this candidate is a good applicable candidate for you. And this is where HR's education in the process, the psychology of interviewing, can come into play. You can offer and ask lead questions from an HR perspective to a department head. Not every department head is talented in interview. Not everybody is anyway. Now, a lot of HR people aren't even talented in interview process. It's a talent. It's a skill. And knowing how to ask the right questions to get the good answers that give you an indication of the potential of this candidate is a skill that is teachable and learnable and as a resource that's available. To know how to, the best question to ask a potential housekeeping person, to know whether they have the aptitude of caring. There's questions that help you with that, or an aptitude of team collaboration. There's old happy adages, and I'm not going to name names to it, but C-level people in companies that used to interview GMs for hotels. There was a story of one in particular, not to name names, that would purposely drop a piece of paper in route with the GM, going to sit down with them for lunch or to meet them in the lobby, to see if the GM would pick up the piece of paper at a hotel that he wasn't running at the time, to have an aptitude of, did they have the mindset of the role to care, the heart of the servant, the perspective of what they were doing, to say, oh, piece of paper on the floor. It's an automatic function for anybody in the hotel industry. As you go through a lobby and where you work, I pick it up at hotels that I'm staying at. Still, I can walk into a lobby and tell you how many lights are out, because it's a thing, because it's a part of what you did in a role. And those are the indicative things that aren't in a checkbox system. They're in an interview system. That interview system has to be integrated into the process. So my solutions to helping HR for hospitality is that we have to invert the system. It's not us sitting back posting what we want and relying on a merit system of, once you've earned your stripes, to be able to get the reward benefits for that level that you've attained. It's the fact that we have to solicit what we have to offer, be clean about what it is that we are, in such a way that we solicit the people to want to be a part of our team. And from that, earn and reward their trust that we are willing to do what we say we're going to do, be truthful, don't over promise and under deliver, be truthful to what we are, commit to them what we say we are going to, we'll be willing to commit, invest in them as a valued asset to our organization, the way we say we are, and whether we even say, but to show it, and to value their part of our relationship. And that comes from the integration of how HR has to be convergent with all the other disciplines to be clear about what it is that we need in such a way that they can define that in the processes of discovery, implementation, filtering, and identification, and transmission of them as a possible team member. So with that, we are coming up on our last minute. Jason, thanks for listening to the whole thing. I'm sure probably you disagree with some of my stuff, I hope, in some ways, and agreed with other stuff, I hope. I appreciate you putting up things on the chat. For the link of what I said, there's a couple of links I didn't even get to because I got on my soapbox on some things. You can reach us at hospitalitychannel.tv. The replay will always be there. The archive, of course, the old archive is still at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. Look for show 326. For those of you that listen to us live, thank you so very much for doing that. We appreciate your time as always. And in strange time zones, again, I'm amazed at sometimes the time zones. We will re-simulcast our live show as always, 11:30 a.m. Sydney time Wednesday, 11:30 a.m. UK time London on Wednesday as well. Of course, for replays, hospitalitychannel.tv. For those of you watching us on our TV channel, thank you for being putting on a big 65-inch TV maybe. But you can watch us on Apple TV. You watch us on Google Play, Apple or Google TV, Amazon Prime, and Roku as well. Just the channel is Hospitality Channel. And the show is always free on that side. There is paid content on the other side for those who subscribe, but the show is always free for us. And of course, everybody that watched us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and all the variety of channels and pages that we're on there. Thank you so very much for all of that as well. Jason, thank you for your attention to us this whole time today as well. So with that, thank you. And we look forward to you joining us. Don't forget, we have our podcast today, which will have a slight recap of today's show, along with some additional tools and a technique discussion as well. And that is always on all of the 39 channels we're on, from iTunes to everything else. So you can find us everywhere on that. So my name is Lauren Gray. And thank you for the privilege of your time, and look forward to talking to you next week.
As you are a representative of the company.
You have a conduit. You have a connection. Like going back to our full circle security discussion, you are the gateway into all the rest of the stuff.